Hi, my name is Anna, and I am a citizen scientist, which is a nicer word for amateur, I suppose, but bear that in mind, please. I have been living in Ireland since December 2016, and I got quite involved in OpenStreetMap in 2019 and Wikimedia, and more recently also in Wikidata and in the local history. Inspired by last year's conference and by the circumstance that my local county council had around that time announced that they would do a Holy Well survey, I decided to conduct my own Holy Well survey, but make all the data available as linked open data. Today, I want to talk mostly about the Wikidata aspect of that, hoping that most people will be familiar with Wikimedia and OpenStreetMap. Just like with Overpass Turbo on OpenStreetMap, you can use the query function on Wikidata to combine certain parameters in a search, rather than just searching for a name. There are also different ways in which the results can be rendered. I will show some examples of that throughout. What we can see here is a search for the image parameter displayed in a grid. But back to the beginning. With some help from Florian, because Wikidata in its complexity was fairly new to me, I started a Wikidata project which is documented here. It explains the most frequently used parameters utilized to describe the Holy Wells of County Kilkenny, which is where I live and which is what I focused on for practical reasons. It is actually not that straightforward to say what a Holy Well is and how to decide whether a water source is a Holy Well or not. So apart from using the instance of Holy Well, Florian suggested that we also use Holy Well semantic concept. But this is definitely the first step of defining the Holy Well as a current or former source of water, which might have curative powers or where people believe it does or did. Most people would probably think that it has to be a spring, but it does not. It can also be a hollow in a tree or a stone, like a Boulogne stone, where rainwater collects, which is obviously quite frequent in Ireland. It helps to have a saint associated with the place. Sometimes it matters for the cure which saint, but not necessarily. I could go into a tangent on the folklore, but we don't have the time. The order on Wikidata is in a hierarchy that people who came before me decided, so the next parameter is an image. These all come from Wikimedia, and in the case of the Holy Wells of County Kilkenny, they are at least 90% my photographs. I haven't checked, it could be all of them. So I do try and visit all the sites, which is a bit tricky because I don't drive, but it makes each visit a bit of a community effort, which I like. Even if that's only a community of two, the driver and myself, sometimes it includes the landowner. Further down in the list of properties, you'll also find a link to the Wikimedia Commons category if there is more than one photograph or media file relating to that well. In the context of that survey, I'm also recording oral history with people talking about Holy Wells, mass bushes, mass paths, and related things. They are all linked with the Wikidata identifier for that Holy Well, or more than one if that applies, and they'll also be in the Wikimedia category if I categorize them properly. For some of them, I have also shot videos to show the landscape and monuments associated with them, which are either on YouTube or Wikimedia or both. Even though that all falls under media, you'll find that further down. Next in the datasheet is the location, which is Ireland, and then the county, civil, parish, and townland. This is useful when you're searching for one and you're not entirely sure about the name or spelling, but you have the townland or even just the parish and you can search for well and location, and it'll hopefully give you a list. By the way, there are about 221 Holy Wells in County Kilkenny alone. I've also added the diocese because most parts of County Kilkenny are in the Catholic Diocese of Ossory, but some are not. That is somewhat important for one of the sources, but we don't need to go into that. After that comes the coordinate location, which I try to get from OpenStreetMap because it is the most open source, but of course that means it has to be mapped. That data on OpenStreetMap can come from out of copyright ordnance survey maps, which are not always correct. And Holy Wells have a nasty habit of moving when they get offended, at least according to folklore. Or you can get it from surveys which are mostly done by myself again. One of the more interesting properties, at least that's what I think, is the named after one. Some are named after their cure or the body part they heal, usually the eyes, as in Tobar na Sól, but many are named after the associated saint, and I think that is quite interesting. For some of them, the original name has already been lost, so they are usually named after the farmer who owns or owned the field, or after the townland. So you can run a query and make a pretty bubble diagram like so. And of course you can click on those and find out more about the saints or whatever. The patron saints of Kilkenny are St. Canice, or Kenny, as he is called in these parts, and St. Kieran, that's Kieran of Sayre, not Kieran of Clonmacnoise. That is a bit tricky to attribute though, and I might have made mistakes because there's very often several saints with the same name. Remember, I'm only an amateur. The names of holy wells is a whole rabbit hole in itself. Where I have found a pattern day in the sources, or where they are actually still celebrated, I've added that as feast day, which Wikidata doesn't like, but I can live with that. A pattern is a day in the year mostly associated with the patron, the saint of the well, when the rosary or even mass is said at the well. At some wells, especially ones with a source of alcohol like a pub nearby, this developed into a less civilized affair and was suppressed by local priests and bishops in the 19th century. Some of them survived into or were revived in the 20th century when they went out of use again after someone got hurt and sued the parish. But some are still surviving to this day in various forms, and since there is no database of them, not even run by the diocese, I thought it might be useful to have that information there. I'm not the first person to try collating an inventory of holy wells of County Kilkenny. As I said, the County Council started one last year and they have finished their second stage. That data is not published yet, but I got a preliminary copy, which was at times helpful. It comes with inventory numbers, which I use in the collection, and inventory number properties. Then there was a man, Pádraig O'Donnelly, who published his thesis in 2018 about the same topic. However, he was focused on the folklore rather than the actual locations and did only about 20 site visits, if it was even that many. But he has them numbered as well, so we get a second inventory number. If I ever get to finish my survey and publish it, there will be a third collection and inventory number, and having them all on Wikidata will make it easier to generate a concordance of the three surveys. I'm really only good at the data input. I'm not very good at creating the queries, but luckily there's always someone on Mastodon who will come to my rescue, so I have this query which was created for me by a user called Midgard. After that, we get into the nitty-gritty of the sources. For some of them, I've added statements for the property described at URL, but I haven't been super consistent with that because any search engine can find that information anyways. The more interesting or useful section, at least I hope it will be for future researchers, is the described by source property, where I list mostly conventional publications like books and maps, but also digital resources I could have listed under described at URL, like the schools collection, which also does exist in paper form. So that was an initiative in the 1930s in the very young independent Republic of Ireland, where school children were given certain topics to ask their parents, grandparents, or other older relatives or neighbours about, and one of them was holy wells. So they usually wrote about the holy well in their parish, or if there was a very popular one further afield, they wrote about that one. They are a great source for folklore, like the cures and the saint stories and such, but not so much to locate the wells, because they often use field names or family names of families who might not live there any longer after nearly 100 years. Whenever I can, I will also record field names on site visits, or whenever I can get someone to share them with me. They are also all on OpenStreetMap. The County Council has a field names project as well, but their website hasn't been working for months, so it's not very useful for research. Anyways, one of the useful options you have in that property, described by source, is the statement subject named as, because these names of holy wells are rarely written in stone. Some are though, so it's interesting to see which source calls them what. Some of the publications by local historians are not great at giving their sources, but sometimes you can trace their source by the name they use. For a couple of the wells, I have made photogrammetry models, but it's really only working for the more developed ones, at least with the technology I'm using, because the app doesn't deal well with vegetation, and I don't have a drone to do the shots. But some of them are more architectural, where it's more worth doing that. That was actually also a requirement by the County Council survey, the photogrammetry models, but they never did that. For some of the wells, I have also added the property mouth of watercourse just because I can, and because I thought it might be interesting to see which one of the rivers in County Kilkenny is the holiest, i.e. which one is fed by most holy wells. I haven't run that query yet, but it would be possible in theory. The last group of properties are the identifiers, which can be one or two attributed by the National Monument Service of Ireland, an OpenStreetMap node or way, and sometimes a Wikiloves Monuments ID. There are no holy wells in County Kilkenny with a Google Knowledge Graph ID yet, as of the 21st of May, but there are others in other areas that do have that. But anyways, I'm really only the person gathering the data and putting them into the database. It's there for others to use and to add to and play around with. I don't know if chatbots use that kind of information, for example. I try not to use them, so I can't test it. Thank you very much for your attention, and if you have any questions, I'm here now in person to try and answer them. Goromila Mahagov.